For the Climate Discussion Nexus, I'm John Robson with the latest readout video from our free Wednesday Wake Up email newsletter, to which I again urge you to subscribe, as I again urge you to support our work if you don't already. And I want to also thank everybody who's contributed. We get notes from people saying, gee, I wish I could give more. Look, we know times are tough. People are living on fixed incomes. Inflation is going up. Everything helps. So again, thanks to everyone who supports us, including through the YouTube thanks button. And we also send greetings to viewers in Thailand, who've made it number 16 on our all-time list of views by jurisdiction. And in fact, it's one of the places that I have visited, though I looked a little different in those days. As COP conferences used to look different, more youthful and more joyous. But when COP30 ground to a dirty halt on November 21st, 2025, despite the rhetoric, including boilerplate like, quote, Canada leaves COP30 with renewed ambition and deeper partnerships for global climate action, end quote, nothing of substance was achieved. Instead, the conference merely highlighted the air of unreality around wealthy Westerners and wealthy elites in poor nations throwing fits over tiny temperature increases and speculative science while real issues go neglected, including that dirty business. Because as Canada's upstart Rebel News documented disgustingly, in the streets of Belém, near the conference, geographically if not sociologically or intellectually, the gutters literally run with human waste. And Rebel News also located a dump in the poor neighborhood of Vila de Barca, where the UN was tossing the construction waste from the conference facilities. What was that Bill Gates was saying again about the world's poor having far worse problems than the climate change that he himself recently treated as a looming apocalypse? When we attended COP29 last year in Baku, Azerbaijan, or more precisely inside a sealed sociological zone that might as well have been a UFO landing in Baku, we at least did go outside the bubble to see a bit of how ordinary people lived. And we felt very strongly that we were in a tiny minority of those in the conference in doing so. So now I ask, how many of the COP30 delegates set foot in Vila de Barca, or even knew it existed, instead of just sitting complacently on diesel cruise ships, not even wondering what the poor were doing? It was also strange, even sad, to watch the remaining zealots gathered at COP30 try to convince themselves and the world that it was an exciting and productive event. The Financial Times ran an inexplicable headline, quote, Global Climate Agreement sealed at COP30 despite deep divisions, end quote. And the reason that headline is inexplicable is that nothing of the sort happened, as the subhead immediately following admitted, quote, push for roadmap on how economies can wean off coal, oil, and gas fails, but Brazilian presidency promises to follow up, end quote. Which prompts me to quote, perhaps surprisingly, Saul Alinsky's infamous book Rules for Radicals, quote, organizations need action as an individual needs oxygen. The cessation of action brings death to the organization through factionalism and inaction, through dialogues and conferences that are actually a form of rigor mortis rather than life, end quote. And what else have COPs been doing for at least the last decade than following up on deals that committed nobody to anything, with more dialogues and conferences marked by factionalism that were actually a form of rigor mortis, and never more than this one in Belém? To which former Canadian Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, despite being demoted to Heritage Minister before departing cabinet in a climate huff, flew to be visibly the great compassionate him, and then flew out early for a budget vote. And amusingly, the press asked him not why he was choking the skies with carbon pollution, but, quote, how can Canada lead on climate and nature if you're not part of these critical negotiations, end quote. Well, how could it lead if we were, especially since they weren't critical? And now, a word from our sponsor, which as always is you. And I've mentioned before, I feel a bit awkward asking for money. I figure people don't like being asked. We understand that many of you are giving what you can, and we get letters from people saying, gee, I wish I could do more, but I'm on a fixed income, I've got a family to feed. So again, we're so grateful to everybody who gives, whether it's $2 a month or one time $50, one time £75. But we are up against very well-funded, government-funded climate alarmists. So if you value our work and you haven't already made a contribution, please do become a sponsor. $2 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever you can afford, so that we can get back to doing what we love best, which is this. Oh, and this item just in, courtesy of NC State News via an alert viewer, quote, in recent years, Chinese tissue paper made from bamboo has emerged as a trendy choice for eco-friendly shoppers. However, new research suggests these bamboo paper products may not offer significant climate benefits over tissue produced in the United States, and in some cases may be more detrimental to the environment, end quote. Gosh, who knew that communist China had dubious manufacturing standards and lied a lot, and the fate of the planet did not hinge on which tissue paper you chose? What's worse, the key issue seems to be, according to the lead study author, that, quote, because the Chinese power grid is so reliant on coal for power, emissions throughout the entire tissue supply chain are higher than what we saw with the wood-based option, end quote. And here everyone cool was telling us China was a clean energy superpowerhouse. Also in the newsletter, the scale problem reared its ugly tiny head again. For instance, quote, Peel Region is advancing sustainable infrastructure and climate resilience through a $1 million investment from the Government of Canada, end quote. And what are we getting for that $1 million, which may be peanuts to Leviathan, but does represent the annual tax bill of dozens of families? Why, it, quote, will retrofit the existing parking lot at 7120 Hurontario Street, one of Peel Region's corporate offices, end quote. One lousy parking lot, and you're asking us to believe it'll fix the weather? And another thing, cold is good, right? Well, so the Weather Network thinks, asking, quote, who left the freezer door open, end quote, then announcing that, quote, Arctic air will be on a southward move next week to bring Canada a major pattern change-up, a healthy reminder that winter is just around the corner, end quote. Healthy. Whereas if heat were coming in, oh, wait, their map is deep red anyway, except around Iqaluit where it's charred. But no mention of the dreaded climate change for once. And then, gack! Canary Media tries to brighten our day with, quote, clean tech entrepreneurs have been trying for years to reinvent pumped hydro storage and to harness the sea to produce energy. Sizable Energy tells Julian Spector it's found a way to do both, with help from giant inflatable donuts it plans to deploy off the coast, end quote. Once upon a time, the climate zealots reported on technology that they, rightly or wrongly, thought was working, not pie in the sky, or, even more comical, donuts in the sea. Also, it's both sad and amusing to read a national review that, quote, the Sierra Club has lost 60% of its 4 million members and held 3 rounds of employee layoffs since 2022 because, as the New York Times wrote, it offended members and volunteers who had loved the club's single-minded defense of the environment by asking them to fully embrace its pivot to the left. Some even felt they were investigated by the club for failing to go along, end quote. So, go woke, go broke, even works for Greens. And another thing, we understand why the media concentrate on the unusual, up to a point. The headline, Saber-toothed tiger lurking outside village in the Paleolithic Times was legitimately more newsworthy than no saber-toothed tiger lurking outside village. But to focus on the unusual while implying it's now normal is misleading. For instance, when every Heatmap AM, and since it comes from editors at heatmap.news, we say they're at least ostensibly offering news, begins with a roundup of weird weather conditions, including, this is a typical one from November 13th, quote, heavy rain and mountain snow is disrupting flights across the southwestern United States. Record November heat across Spain brought temperatures as high as 84 degrees Fahrenheit, end quote. And while we say roundup, of course, it's cherry picking. Because when's the last time there wasn't inconvenient weather, or at least surprising weather, somewhere on our big planet? But instead, they make it sound as though we're experiencing, climate breakdown by never saying stuff like, large swaths of Eastern Europe experience typical weather again. Also, we've been keeping an eye on the federal Canadian Carney administration's efforts to go sane on climate policy, somehow squaring their carbon obsession with a desire not to wreck the economy too quickly and drastically. And as we predicted, it's not going well. The Fraser Institute's Kenneth Green, in the Calgary Sun, notes that the first and second tranches of projects anointed by the Prime Minister to be re-anointed by the Major Projects Office doesn't include any oil pipelines. As Green added tartly, quote, the absence of proposed oil pipelines was not surprising, as Ottawa's regulatory barricade on oil production means no sane private company would propose such a project, end quote. And even if they wanted to, it's bizarrely hard to see how. Because instead of sweeping away regulations, simplifying the process, and dropping the woke warming zealotry, Canada's government has found a way to make it even worse, as we feared. And now for some culture. We're actually filming this video right before Christmas, so I've been listening to Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, and Dinah Shore exchanging insults in a 1944 command performance for American troops overseas. But in the newsletter, we'd referenced the theme from New York, New York, which said in Liza Minnelli's original, "If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. Come on, come through New York, New York." But when it comes to the green energy transition, New York didn't come through. As Steve Everly argues on David Blackman's Substack, and as the Manhattan Contrarian has long warned, quote, "The grand experiment has failed," end quote. Instead, the state government is desperately trying to get a natural gas pipeline in place in less than a year because Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul's office said, quote, "We need to govern in reality," end quote. Oh, there's a revelation. And the governor's office explained, as if it too were some kind of revelation, the, quote, "top priority is making sure the lights and heat stay on for all New Yorkers as we face potential energy shortages downstate as soon as next summer," end quote. So, speaking of World War II, cast your mind back to New York City on VJ Day 1945, which is when the musical action starts. It's a city on top of the world. The bright lights of Broadway are unquenchable, and the future is brighter still. How can the enlightened, nay anointed, have led it from one dream to another until suddenly they're not sure the light switch will work in 2026? Also, at this time of year, in case you're planning a New Year's dip, we think it's only fair to warn you that global oceans have been cooling for a long time. A long time as in 4.5 million years. And notwithstanding recent warming, the oceans, including their deepest layers, are colder now than they've been for most of that time. Thanks to Kenneth Richard at No Trick Zone, we're alerted to a paper that was published in early 2025, which uses paleoclimate proxies, so all the usual cautions apply. But lots of recent reconstructions of sea surface, mid-ocean, and bottom water temperatures look remarkably similar, namely like this chart. The horizontal axis here starts 4.5 million years ago, that's MA, and clearly the oceans, and everything in them, has spent that period basking in greater warmth than at present, despite the fact that we're told the seas are now boiling, experiencing unprecedented ocean warming, and so on ad Guterres. And you also notice that the temperatures are fluctuating atop that long downward trend long before modern greenhouse gases. So much for hottest year ever. And indeed, if you get into the details, so much for settled science due to, quote, uncertainties in the proxy methods commonly used to measure temperatures, end quote. Why weren't we told? Because it kind of matters that corals and all the other creatures in the ocean evolved over long periods when the water was warmer than at present. And yes, we did tell them. In this week's newsletter, we also started a new series. It's a deep dive into this summer's Department of Energy climate report, going chapter by chapter. And of course, we encourage you to read the report yourself. But what with all the critics' sound and fury, and in case you have a life, which we wouldn't know what to do with if we did have one, we plunged in, starting with the first two chapters, which explain something that in fact CDN readers and viewers already know. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant, it's plant food, and it is leading to global greening. Finally, in case you hate golf or sheep, from the CO2 Science Archive, we present Festuca bovina L, or sheep fescue. It's a hardy grass that's widespread in rangeland and meadow areas, though weirdly, sheep don't much like it. Cattle and horses also stay clear of the stuff, but golf course designers often use it to add to humanity's woes. In any case, it's going to continue to thrive, since from 1991 to 97, 6 experiments showed that an extra 300 parts per million of CO2 resulted in an average growth boost of 47.7%. For the Climate Discussion Nexus, I'm John Robson shouting for... oh, darn.